What is up, people? So I am making the TOK review video first. And so the first thing I wanted to do was talk about where to get all your resources to make sure you have all those. So everything is uploaded in Teams. All the slideshows are there too. So hopefully that's helpful. And if I could find it, here's what a completed unit package should look like. You've got cover sheet, classical definition of knowledge, knowledge issues, all of this stuff. It's not going to be, the test is not going to directly cover some of these things, but it'll be helpful to have those, especially just in general for like the future. But the assessment is going to be on this part of the unit, right here, which is anything with the constitution knowledge on down. So applying ethical lenses perspectives. I did give a review scenario, which is going to ask the same exact questions that you're going to get on the actual assessment. It's just going to be a different situation. So you're going to have one situation where you're going to apply knowledge claims, knowledge questions, because that's always a starting thing that you have to do. And then there'll be rationalism and empiricism. And then there's going to be an ethical dilemma, just a dilemma, not actually tying it to knowledge or theory of knowledge specifically yet, but there will be an ethical dilemma, and you have to come up with how two different perspectives would view what would be ethical in that situation. So aligning it with an ethical perspective. So make sure everything is in one place because you can use your notes. I'm going to discard those. Since I'm on this slideshow, I'm going to talk about ethics first. The big thing about ethics is just understanding what they look at, these four big perspectives, and then also the different concepts that we had in that article would be helpful to have on hand. I would say, though, for most of the assessment in this particular time, you're really going to be focusing on these four perspectives. So we had four big perspectives in ethics, and then we were just applying them to various dilemmas and situations. There's other concepts you can apply too. But again, the thing to ask yourself is, what should you do in this situation? And then based off of what you should do, you're thinking about what is the emphasis on? What is the thing that you're using to determine whether or not it is right or wrong, or ethical or unethical, or moral or immoral, even though those are technically different terms. You can use them interchangeably right now. So deontology, the idea that people have specific moral obligations. So the big question you should be asking yourself when think about things from a deontological perspective is, who has the obligation here? Who has the duty, is what we say sometimes. You need to act in accordance with your duty. So in this case, there is a right or wrong because you have to act in accordance with your obligations. Generally, what they would say is that whatever is treating people as an end in themselves, whatever is the most respectful towards a specific person, and what a reasonable person would say is your obligation to someone in the way that we understand our right and wrong ways of treating each other in that situation. So again, this is actually going to be on the choice that's made. The focus is on the choice based off of the obligation. The second one was utilitarianism or consequentialism. Technically, again, those are a little bit different, but you can use them interchangeably. Here, we want to look at the most important thing is the outcome or the impact that it has. So whatever that action was taken, the action itself is not necessarily right or wrong. It's about the impact that that action has. So that's what creates the morality or immorality there. And a utilitarian specific type of consequentialism that would say we want the greatest good for the greatest number. That's what utility is, usefulness, basically. That's what they would focus on. Not always, but sometimes you'll find that these two might be kind of in conflict with one another, given the situation. Virtue ethics is where you look at the intent of the actual person. That's the most important thing. The action should be done with virtuous motivations. Now, we don't have to get a lot into the philosophical musings behind intentions and motivations right now. That's more for a philosophy class. But what we look at is think about, what are the intentions? Are those intentions pure good, or intending something good to happen? Oftentimes, you might find that intentions and outcomes might conflict with one another, for example. Not often. Usually good intentions lead to good outcomes, but not always. Usually bad intentions lead to bad outcomes, but not always. And then ethics of care or social context just means we must act in accordance with the needs of society. Nothing's independent of the context. And then they usually look at these attributes. I don't really know why I made an arrow. When I first took notes on this, learning about philosophy, I made these arrows, but they're not necessarily leading to one another. It's kind of like you need to act with intention. You need to act in a responsible manner given the needs of your society. You need to only act in areas in which you are competent. And when you are competent, you should act in accordance with that competence. Like if you're a doctor and you're on an airplane and you have the competence of you giving medical attention, you should act in that situation because you are competent. On On the flip side, maybe you shouldn't act if you're not competent in that situation. You need to be responsive to the needs of others. And then plurality, which just means being open-minded and accepting the views of others and being tolerant of people that are different from yourself. So ethics of care. Those are the 4 big ones. Whenever you have a big knowledge issue or area of knowledge, you're probably going to run into some of those in terms of how the knowledge is developed or distributed or communicated or consumed. So thinking about those would be a good thing to consider. That's the first big concept, even though it's going to come later. I'm going to discard those. The other thing we talked about was rationalism, empiricism. It goes back to John Locke and Rene Descartes here, and it's about the creation of knowledge. So how do we create knowledge? And I'm going to go through them really quickly. Obviously, they're more complicated, but really quickly, talk about rationalism, empiricism. Rationalism is generally associated with Rene Descartes. The basic belief is, and this is about what is the primary way of creating knowledge. You could say the best way, but it's the primary way. Here, it's their person's intellect, and that means the basic source of knowledge we use is rational thinking, rationalism, logic, reasoning, rationalism, reasoning. So principle 1 is reason is the only true source of knowledge, or the only source of true knowledge. Humans are born with certain ideas called a priori or a priori or a priori, if you want to be Southern. Principle 2 is that the basic methods of gaining knowledge are intuition, which we'll talk about when we get to math, and abstract logical thought. Okay, so thinking broadly about things. Principle 3 is the truth of knowledge is determined by how our thinking or reasoning matches up with intellectual laws. This is a lot more like coherency truth tests than correspondence, for example. Sometimes you can't correspond. Now, generally, what you think about logically should correspond with what's happened in the real world, but it's not necessarily something that's required. So that's rationalism in a nutshell, as it were. Next, we have empiricism. So, you want to get in there? Sorry, you're on the video. Here, use this and bring it back. I'm recording a TOK review right now. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Cora Phelps, everybody, on YouTube forever.
Can I say hi?
You're not on here, but you can say hi. Say hi.
Hi.
There you go. Perfect. All right. So empiricism is related to John Locke, and empiricism is the basic belief that all human theoretical practical knowledge is based on experience. Empiricism starts with E, experience, experiment, empirical sciences. Okay. Or observation, so sense perception is more important. So the truth is based on observation. That's a lot more like correspondence. Okay, it's got to match up. Sorry, I'm writing on an upright screen right now. The Bobo doll. Okay. Yeah. All right, thank you. Principle 1 is that knowledge begins with the experiences of our sense perceptions and our reflection on experience. So it's not saying that you never reason through things. It's just saying that the most important thing is reasoning. Sense perception. But then you do some reasoning afterwards. Principle 2 is, again, reasoning has a role, but sensation and perception are the basic forms of creating knowledge. And principle 3 is that knowledge is based on its correspondence with our experience. So it lines up with what we've observed, which is why it's more of a correspondent truth. Generally, Immanuel Kant, once again, kind of had this idea that knowledge might begin with our experience, and that's our perception, but it ends in the mind, which means we create categories and principles in our mind, like a categorical imperative, for example. And those are all the major concepts that I taught you about specifically. The only other thing for this assessment is I will ask you about the Constitution of Knowledge, which we spent some time on, and that reading looks like this. Maybe. That we did a discussion and we also did those little posters on them. So what you want to make sure that you understand is, gosh, I can't find it. The 2 overarching rules for reality, which are the empirical rule, known as personal authority, and then also the fallibus rule, which means no one gets final say, which means your knowledge should be subject to withstanding honest critiques, basically, honest counter evidence. And then we also had the second part, which was about the common core values of shared knowledge, which are right here. We talked about a few of them in class. We didn't do all of them, but knowing maybe like 2 or 3 of those really well would be good. So if you can do all that and apply it to the situation, then you should be good for the TOK end of Unit 1 assessment. And that's pretty much it. So I'm going to end this segment. Let me know if you got any questions. Smash that like button. Hit like and subscribe. Let's keep those likes higher than those dislikes. And I'll talk to you later. All right. Bye-bye now.